trying to engage on matters public finance. Our job is really to facilitate collaboration among citizens in their different forms of organizing, support them in how they engage towards the transformation of our country. And it's a pleasure for me to spend the next just about 50 minutes or so with us, reflecting on you as a professional, your place in public budgets. How do we make policy personal and participatory? Some things I say perhaps may be things that you know, but I hope I can challenge us to just think a bit more about our role in society. And I start that by saying that we all can make a big difference. Change is not what happens when big teams of people work, but when individuals, do some collective, starting with their different spaces, and then that collective definitely becomes bigger, than the sum total of the pieces. Sorry. I start with the Kenya governance framework because that is important. So the desire to engage, to participate, to make our contribution is within a context. And that context is the Kenya's governance framework, which is a devolution system. Devolution not just of responsibility, but also of political power and resources in how they are spent. So a national government, and county governments, 47 of them, one national government, each with an executive arm, national led by the president, counties led by the governor, and at the county level, both county and national government with a parliament, the national one being a bicameral, that is the National Assembly, and the Senate, and then at the county level, you have the county assemblies. Now, those institutions are actually provided with a constitutional mandate that distributes functions between national and county governments and the agencies and the departments that operate within there. Of course, you have an independent judiciary that is supposed to be an independent arbiter for all matters and for all laws, whether by county or by national. And then you have another couple, so the judiciary, and then you have independent institutions, commissions such as that of the Office of the Auditor General. I'm just going to mention the ones that are relevant to public finance, the Commission on Revenue Allocation, the Office of the Control of Budget, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. Again, these are institutions that serve both levels of government, but they are constitutionally established with independent. Now, of interest is that both levels of government prepare their own budgets, both how they intend to raise revenue through the mechanisms provided for in Article 209 of the Constitution and supported by other laws. But they also prepare their own expenditure, estimates of expenditure, how they plan to spend that money. For the resources on how they are distributed is largely that functions of each level should determine the quantum or the ratio of resources that should go to that level of government. So, for example, the national government is fully responsible for matters security, and therefore the quantum of resources that should provide security services should go to the national government. But something like healthcare, you have the top tier of health facilities being in the hands and policy matters being in the hands of the national government, but you have the bulk of service delivery being at the county level, and therefore you want to see a similar ratio in terms of proportion, similar proportion of resources. And it goes like that. And I refer you to Schedule 4 of the Constitution, which basically does distribute. So that's the context. That's the framework within which all this happens. And it's in that context that then we are encouraged and expected to bring in our capacity, our competencies, and our engagement. So the budget cycle has got 4 stages. Here, I'll just mention them and then I'll explain them a bit more in detail. Largely, we have what we call the budget formulation, which includes the planning, the framing of issues, and it's basically at the point we identify what are the needs and what are going to be the policy responses to those needs. Of course, some of these policies are set long before. So we determine for the coming financial year and in the medium. And every time you hear us talk about the medium term, we are talking about 3 years from the point of planning. So in the medium term, basically you're saying of 2025, 2026, 2026, 2027, and 2027, 2028. That's the framing. What resources what issues are we going to respond to, and what resources will we allocate them to those issues? As it were, then the budget approval, this is when it goes to the parliament, to the National Assembly at the national, I mean to parliament at the national level, both National Assembly and Senate, and to the county assemblies at the county level. And then budget implementation is then the documents. So first of all, that all budget documents originate from the county executive or from the national executive. Then they go to parliament for approval and then come back to the executive for implementation. And then, of course, the relevant bodies, especially the Office of the Auditor General, does facilitate the auditing, or what we call the evaluation, value for money audits, and everything around. So these stages are interdependent, and so are the documents that is of the information which is in each of these stages, so that the planning documents inform what goes to the budget estimates that go for approval, which informs what gets implemented. Maybe I should correct my words, which should inform what gets implemented, because sometimes you have variances, and basically that's what the auditor does check. That whole process actually takes about 2.5 years, about 28 months, just from start to end. And there are numerous opportunities for participation, which I will be speaking to. So generally, this is how the process looks like. And it's a conversation. It's a conversation between largely three actors. So it's a conversation between the executive arm of government that basically has a responsibility to run with these obligations, and the citizens who are the consumers of these services, and their representatives who then mediate. So the county assemblies are the members of parliament, the members of the county assembly, and the senators. And basically, as you can see, that's the whole process of how it runs from beginning to the end of the year. So for important is that at any one point you have overlapping processes. Perhaps I'll jump here, then come back. So this is a cycle that we have developed at Budgeti Hub. And basically what it does is that it gives you a framing. So from the outside is the blue circle, is the formulation. Then you have the approval, which is where we are right now. Then you have the yellow line, and then you have the red line. So basically, so from August to December basically is the time when we are processing. So perhaps you're wondering, so when do this, how does the process look like? So our financial year as a country runs from July 1st. So our financial year begins next week on Tuesday or Thursday, on Wednesday, Tuesday, yes, and runs through 30th of June. So we are just at the tail end of the 2024-2025 financial year, and just about to start the 2025-2026 financial year. But then by the August of this year, we'll start preparing for the 2026-2027 years. In other words, at any one point, we are either evaluating the previous year, we are implementing the current year, and we are planning for the coming year. So that's the overlap. So you have the budget review and outlook papers, you have sector hearings. There's quite a bit of things that go, but the most important document here, which should concern us, is the circulars that are issued by the National Treasury for the national level, and the county treasury at the county level, because it outlines the entire process, including spaces for public participation and some initial thinking about what needs to happen. Then February and April is perhaps the most important time in the budget cycle. I know we put a lot of focus on June, but sometimes that is too late in the game, because in February and April is where the ceilings for spending are established and determined. What does this mean? It means that what we are going to spend in the broad sector of education, everything education, is decided on in February. What we are going to spend on everything agriculture at County A is determined in February. And this goes to Parliament, because these ceilings are what guides the that dictates the broad priority. It's also the time when we state what are going to be our policy focus. What are we focusing on in terms of policy interventions and responses to the different needs of society? And how will that then translate into budgets? So a lot of the things that are determined in February only come to be approved. And I'll explain. So for instance, in February, at the national level, we have 10 sectors. One of those sectors is agriculture, rural, and urban development sector. So we will decide everything that will go to agriculture, will go to urbanization, will go to rural interventions, all those things. But when it comes to the time up to April, we will then break that down into estimates that are very specific in terms of lines of expenditure. And therefore, May to June, what happens in May to June is that we are discussing within the sector, but the sector ceilings, the sector total provision for that sector has already been determined in February. So if you ask me, a lot of the energy that we put around this particular time should actually be directed in February, April. Even the finance bill is actually determined in February, in the sense that that is the time we determine how much more of the resources do we need. Because remember, a budget is a conversation between, as I said, between citizens, their government, and the executive, and their representatives in the National Assembly. But it's a conversation about what? It's basically about income, revenue, and expenditure. Where does the government revenue come from? Comes from the taxes that are levied. And of course, that's the time when we decide how much more taxes do we want to raise. So we say we are going to have a budget of 3,000 shillings. Last year, we had only 2,000 shillings that came through revenues of taxation. We are going to raise more we want to raise another 400, maybe 300 shillings. So we are going to raise 2,300. So what the finance bill will come to do, the finance bill will only provide extra measures that will enable the government to collect this extra 300 shillings. And then we say that's the difference of the 700 shillings, how much might come as, as funds that are going to be, given either, by way of donations. And then the difference is what we say, this is going to be our borrowing amount, including the amount that will go to counties is actually determined through the division of revenue that is actually tabled in February. So in May, June, the season that we are just closing right now, for the purposes of 25-26 financial year, what the president actually assented this morning, the budget, the appropriation bill, the finance bill, all those, and of course the supplementary, and I can say something about the supplementary later on, is actually, those are now the indications. So the supplementary, of course, is for the current financial year. We can have a debate of whether it's really a supplementary, but that's a story for another day. So around May, June, it is line by line items that are being approved. That's very, very critical. So the focus in June on the approval of the individual lines, while merited, according to our constitution, is actually very late in the game, if you ask me. February to April is perhaps the time. And of course, what happens before that in terms of planning. Then implementation begins on July 1st. And this is where part of the things we expect is implementation report. The role of the controller of budget is more pronounced during implementation stage. And then once the financial year is over, by December, the Auditor General is supposed to start beginning. So they have about 6 months, or they are about 3 or 6 months to close their books, to prepare their financial statements, and then the auditor kicks in. So that's the process. So it's a conversation about revenues and expenditures, and between citizens, their representatives, and the government of the day, as it were. So how then do we engage? Because perhaps this is the reason why we gathered this evening, is to ask ourselves as professionals. There are perhaps four or five questions I would like us to build on. So as we think about this cycle, now this cycle is important because you have an opportunity to participate. A lot of things, a lot of discussions go on during this cycle.
Yeah, so maybe Daktari, as I try to mute a few members here, maybe a good question for you in the previous slide. You said the finance bill should come in. You mentioned February.
Yes, so the finance targets come in February. Perhaps I should have indicated. Let me just indicate actually on this sheet. Sorry. Where is this? Oh yeah. So if you look at this blue section, you'll see a date there, April 30th. You see where the blue section ends.
Yeah.
That is the time at which the finance bill is actually tabled. The finance bill we are talking about that was approved last week has been in parliament from April 30th. This time it was delayed, so it came in around May 4th or thereabout. But the targets, what the finance bill does, so finance bill only outlines extra measures for collection of revenue. So you would ask, okay, fine. So if it's only providing, let me give you an example. This year, the budget, the total collection of revenue as projected by government is 2.76 trillion. So call it 2,760. But the finance bill, the extra measures that the finance bill is targeting to raise is actually 30 billion. So you'd ask, so where will the other 2.73 come from? It's because the finance bill only amends, proposes adjustments or deletes sections of already existing taxation laws. There are various tax acts. There is VAT, value added tax has its own act. There is income tax. So even if there is no finance bill, it does not mean there will be no tax collection. And to differentiate that, the finance bill only provides for revenue measures. In fact, all the finance bill does largely is to give KRA, the Kenya Revenue Authority, powers to levy more taxes or to introduce new measures, tighten administrative measures, make others more complicated or make them lighter, whatever. That's what the finance bill does. But the actual process of the document that has the details of what is being spent on is appropriation. That's why today, when you look at the memorandums that the president, the documents that the president actually did assent to today, he assented to the finance bill, which is the measures for revenue collection. He assented to the appropriation bill, which basically is a law that allows government to spend money on areas, on agriculture, on healthcare, transfer to counties, blah, 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 all of the like. But he also ascended to the supplementary budget, which basically is the appropriation bill for the current financial year, which basically is the adjustments to budget. And I can take more questions on that. So as we think about ourselves, many of us here professionals working in different spaces, a big question we all struggle to answer is, how then can I be engaged in a meaningful way? Now, unless you are like myself, who spends all his day thinking about budgets in all its different facets, and even in any case, there are still areas of budget that I have no idea. Even my team has no idea about what goes in there because they require certain expertise. All engagement has to start with the needs analysis. And what needs do you better know than the needs that matter to you, that are closest to you? The dispensary that you and yours, so you and yourself, your family, your uncles, your aunties, people back in the village, for those of us who have families outside the city, needs analysis. I mean, there are things that really bother you. For many of us are bothered about healthcare because we have to keep sending money for buying of drugs, taking our kin to a private facility. Yet there's a health facility right outside your door, right near your place, which basically has allocations. And therefore, many times our engagement can become very theoretical. We can become keyboard warriors and the like. But unless it bothers us, the road we use to go to and from work, the police post or the police station near our places, the garbage that is, being collected or not being collected. Those are the things that should inform our engagement. And because we're talking about how do we make this personal, I don't find anything that is more personal than what I have to deal with every day. But unfortunately, sometimes we look aside, imagining that it's a responsibility of, so So I want to, and then to challenge us, perhaps to think around these four other questions: the what of engagement, the who of engagement, the when of engagement, and the result of that engagement. So let me start with the what of engagement. The what of engagement is basically of the needs that you see around you. What is it that you want to be bothered and you want to pursue? I mean, you can try to pursue police services, education services, health services, water services, agriculture services, but you can't do all that. Are there specific areas of policy that you can take up to bother yourself about what is policy? Policy, basically, I should have defined this at the very beginning. Policy really is the government's position about how to address a need. So, for instance, it's government policy that every child of a certain age must be immunized against polio. So that's government's policy. So the question is there financing that is sufficient? According to the constitution, it's government policy that every person should receive healthcare of the highest standard or should have access to water. So the what of your engagement will definitely be informed by what need you are bothered about. I mean, we are bothered by many problems, but what is it that so that forms the content of what you want to engage on. And when you take that, what I have found is that then you dig deeper. You find out now the next question of who do I need to engage? Because the who in healthcare will not be the same as the who in security, or will not be the same as the who in water sector, or will not be the same as this is the person or the office that is responsible for the delivery of that service. That is responsible for how policies are translated into plans, how those plans are translated into budgets, how those budgets are translated into actual services. Because what is not budgeted for does not exist. It does not matter the rhetoric out there. What is not budgeted for in government does not exist. People can talk about it. There can be shouts by the however senior the politician is. If it is not provided resources for, it will not be done. So you need to identify if this is the matter that I'm going to engage in. I've decided I want to be bothered about healthcare. Who is responsible for provision of the healthcare at the level I care? Who is responsible for the running of that health center or that dispensary or that police center, police station, or that water service, connection of water services and what have you? Because that then starts to bring you down to a very specific office, to a very specific person even, who then can be able to tell you these are the challenges we are facing, who you can be able to engage for the purposes of what, and we have found that by knowing who is involved, you would come to realize they are also struggling perhaps with the same questions that you are asking. They are wondering why are there delayed disbursements, for instance. When we go to a health facility and don't find drugs, the first question is to ask, even to almost want to fight with the nurse, why are there no drugs here? But perhaps when you engage that nurse, you'll find out actually they have not been allocated any resources in the last couple of months, or drugs actually have not been procured, or they are procured but they are sitting at the central, at the central location or the cold room. That's why. But it's not enough to know to know your needs. It's not enough to know what of engagement. It's not enough to know who should be engaged. It's also important to know when to engage. Now, the reason why, yes, please.
So let's assume, I think this is an interesting topic. Let's assume what matters to me is education.
Correct.
So what would be the policy, like the government policy for that matter?
Good. So let's take your example of education. So education, I would say I'm bothered about education. What part of education bothers me? So let's say I'm bothered by how the nursery school that is around me is run. So that's the ECD. Who is responsible for ECD? It's the county government. Who in the county government is the Department for Education within the county government? What are the policies? So you start now investigating. What are the policies that guide how ECD is undertaken? Some of it will take you, for instance, into the curriculum aspects of it. At KICD, I would go to that school and talk to the teacher in charge, who then would tell me these are the kind of allocations we have. This is the number of children that we are dealing with. What I'm saying is, if you start it the other way around, you start from the office of the governor, and the governor deals with everything. But if you started from the point of service, And I always encourage, I know we are professionals, we are busy, but the point to start with any policy engagement is at the point of service delivery, because that is where the nuts and the bolts. And I can give you, I mean, many, many examples where you've gone and you found, I remember one experience in one of the counties where, basically water projects were not moving. And then we go to the person who is responsible and he says, yeah, it's not that we don't have money. It's not that we don't get allocations. But when we go for public participation, citizens want 10 boreholes. Every village wants their own borehole. We have 10 million shillings. The feasibility study, meaningful feasibility study for some of those areas, because it's the topology is a very difficult one in that county. Some of them require up to 3 million, 4 million. So by the time you do all that, you have moved something in each of the projects. Some of them you have done nothing, but no borehole is available. And therefore, we engaged and they said, okay, fine, why don't you help citizens to come up with something called a cost reference, which basically says, this is how much it costs to do a feasibility study, this is how much it costs to do the drilling, this is how much it costs to do the piping. And they realized that in some places, you need actually the entire amount available to be able to provide just one borehole. And that changes a lot, I hope. So the when of engagement, it's really about nothing happens per chance. Yes, sometimes there are political pronouncements and things that had not even been planned for get done, but more often than not, government follows a process. So the when of engagement is knowing, is this the time for planning? If this is the time for planning, there are certain, again, there are even departments that are fully responsible just for planning purposes. Or is it this is time for auditing? So if it's a time for auditing and it's a time to follow the money, then the person responsible for auditing will not necessarily be the person responsible for implementation. If it's time for approval, then you know very well that the person you need to be chasing is your MCA or your member of parliament, and not necessarily your county executive officer or your cabinet secretary for health at the national level, because that time the boat has already sailed from their desks. It's now in the National Assembly, or it's in the, so the when of engagement is a question about at what level of the policy framework. And then, of course, the result of engagement. And this is tied largely to the needs. And the result of engagement is to really, because again, as I said, we are professionals, is to ask yourself, what do I want to see out of this? Because knowing what you want to see out of a process is as important as the energy you put into that process, into pursuing it. And therefore, if my goal is to make sure that every child who goes to that health facility is immunized, and I use example of immunization, is perhaps one of the most effective, then I bother myself with that. As I engage with the members of the community health management team, or I engage with the nurse, I engage with the dispensary, whatever I'm pushing for, leveraging my power and my privilege, I'll be working towards that result. For some of us, all we are bothered about is whether citizens are able to participate meaningfully, and therefore that becomes our focus. Allow me to go to the last slide, and then I open it up for conversation. So key questions to ask, or that we can contribute to, about the budget. Often than not, many of us point fingers, raise questions, are troubled by why government is doing this and not doing the other. But perhaps there are key questions or areas where we can contribute to. The first one aligns with the planning stage, which is a question of what are the priorities and why should these be the priorities? So in healthcare, why should these be the priorities at this particular time? What should they be? That's a critical question to ask. And the second part basically is helping you ask yourself, okay, fine. Are these the right priorities? Perhaps you could be convinced this is not the right priority. The right priority should be provision of water, not buying more drugs, or employing more nurses, because we are spending a lot of time on curative measures, yet we are not dealing with what is causing all this cholera and typhoid, and it's not clean water. So the question is, what should be those priorities? And is it something that you can put together? What are the trade-offs? There's always a trade-off. Budgets are about trade-offs. In other words, something has to give for something else to happen. And that becomes therefore a meaningful area in which we can be able to. So if these are not the priorities, what are the priorities? What do you think should be the priorities? Why? And one of the things we keep pushing government is to give justification of why A and not B, or why C and not B, and why B and not D, is doing. Where is the money coming from, or where should the money come from? All these things have to be funded. All these things have to be provided for resources. So where should the money come from? Should the money come from the already collected taxes, or should this be money that people contribute separately? Because many times, yes, the needs are increasing, and it's true. We want more money, we want more resources for different things, but more money means only two things. One, either you collect more taxes, or you borrow more. And you could think of taxes as basically citizens meeting more of their costs for provision of services, either by them being taxed or by them making a contribution. So think about school fees. You have capitation, money that is being transferred from the exchequer, tax collection already, and you tell parents to pay more to school fees, or you borrow. So you take more public debt and pay for school, then no parent pays any money to school. All children just walk in. Each has its own cost, has trade-offs that you are making. By not having school fees being paid, you have almost 100% enrollment of the relevant age cohorts and transitions. But then perhaps on the other side, it then leaves you with a very big public debt, which then becomes future tax. In other words, even if you have saved people from taxing them now, you will still tax them later, which is perhaps where we are right now. The third question is, are the targets both for revenue and expenditure realistic? So by asking that question, you basically are looking for justifications. Why should this be the revenue level? Why should this be the expenditure level? Because the difference between revenue and expenditure is what either gives you a surplus or gives you a deficit. And many times when you're running a deficit, then you're running a debt-driven budget. But the question for professionals is, what actually should inform that realism? I know this is a difficult question. So every second question I have put there is a question for you to make a contribution to. The first one is easier when you're asking government officials to justify why this is realistic, why they think. But even you can engage and ask ourselves, what should inform this kind of realism? Is it, the economic level of the people you're trying to engage? Is it the size of the needs? Is it the trade-offs? Is it the facing? Because not everything must be done now. Some things can wait and be done, in a phased level. And finally, what is the public participation process like? Has citizen input been considered in this process? Or how should actual public participation look like in the place where you are? If majority of the people in that area are professionals, they are spending their day at work during why hold public participation on a weekday? Why not on a Saturday morning? Why not make it virtual, a Zoom call in the evening, and everybody joins in? So those are areas which I think, and as budgetary team, we've been trying to encourage many citizens and particularly professionals to be able, so that then our contribution is not just asking questions, but it's also trying to contribute. I, however, must put a rider that it's not always that because we don't have all the array of information, that's not our daily job. That should not make us shy away from asking questions, because sometimes I've heard people say, in government say, why are you just telling us what is wrong? Why don't you give us also options or alternatives or proposals? Yes, sometimes we can give proposals, but sometimes our only proposal is actually by asking questions, because then that means the person who has a responsibility, who is employed, and that's their daily job, can go ahead and go and research and bring us what are the different options. And I guess that's where I'll stop. And then I can take questions, comments, and thoughts. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so thank you, Dr. This is, it's a great topic that everyone, I was looking at the charts and everyone is interested with these slides. So that means it's a topic that we need to talk about it more. So thank you. That was a great presentation. Yes, I'm looking at the chart and I'm not seeing any question from the members. Okay, I see one. Yeah, I see comments, Daktari, are very insightful. Yes, those are the great comments that I've seen. Let me take this question from Langat, CPA Langat Joseph. Yes, I like the enabling section of the law, which empowers the citizens to engage. And of course, the means of getting the feedback. So that is one question from Langat, the enabling law. And then there's a question from Juliet Naisola. That is my good friend, Naisola. So Naisola is like, does the government really consider citizens' input during public participation? And she goes further and she's like, if so, share a case where your input was considered. Because I have the same feeling with Naisola, whereby I don't think public participation has an impact. So maybe Daktari, take the two
Good, good.
questions
Yeah.
as we proceed.
Yeah. So thanks, Langat, and thanks, Juliet. And thanks for all the comments and the encouragement and good feedback. Let me start with Langat's question. So first of all, the Constitution of Kenya does make it very clear that, and I'll only cite three articles. So Article 10 of the Constitution and Article 201 specifically. 201 is the first article in the Public Finance Management chapter 12, which basically says that all processes of public finance shall include participation of the citizens. If you go again to Article 1, I believe 174, 175, and 176 on devolution, again, it provides for participation of citizens. But then you go to the Public Finance Management Act, must be Article 137, I think to 142, again, provides a whole framework of how. And then the last one is the County Government Act, I believe Article 107, 108, and 109. Again, provides in fact, the County Government Act for the county level provides a very detailed framework of the spaces, both the means of participation and mechanisms of feedback. And then different county governments have passed citizen participation laws in to different levels of detail. National level, we still do not have a law for public participation. You will remember the different court rulings, including that of the Supreme Court last year or early this year. My memory loses me, but I know there has been ruling, including by the Supreme Court, especially around the finance bill for 2024 and a couple of others. There is a law at the national level that is doing its rounds, but I cannot tell you where it is as we talk in terms of a framework. But at the county level, I know that there are laws. There are also county government guidelines. I have been involved in drafting them both at the beginning in 2014, 15, and we've just revised them just recently, and I'm sure they will. Do governments consider public participation? That's a mixed picture. It's a really mixed picture because there are many times when we have seen governments consider participation. The process, first of all, the reason why sometimes you don't see whether government is considering, no, first of all, let me qualify my statement that public participation remains one of the weakest links in terms of our public finance for one reason, that even when citizens come and give their input, we do not have a process of providing feedback of how the input of the citizens was utilized in making decisions. However, we are seeing progress, but pockets of progress. So for instance, the two finance bills of last year and this year have actually been accompanied by with details of what citizens said and what action was taken. And therefore, and you realize that, for instance, there's been a long debate about certain provisions within the law, such as last year we had this provision where basically KRA was going to be given rights to actually be able to look into the private dealings of individuals, financial details, and what have you. That has been dropped twice. And it's a matter of, and it's basically purely from feedback of public engagement. You have examples from counties. I have seen where counties have pushed, citizens have pushed for certain facilities, for water services, for healthcare services, to be done. But the picture is still far from being neat and admirable in terms of participation. So again, but as I've said, a big part of it is that there's not much feedback of how that input was utilized to be able to make decisions to be able to inform policy considerations. My reading, and I've been in this space long enough to really be convinced that this is perhaps the way it's all going, is that it's getting more and more, the pressure to actually account for how resources are being budgeted for how citizens' input is being processed is increasing. This year, you saw the Finance and Planning Committee of the national government actually use mechanisms, technology to collect views. In as much as some of it they said was spam after they had received it, but that's just one of the areas again where we don't have much participation is what we call, and I said I'll mention about it later, is the supplementary budgets. So supplementary budgets are a mixed picture and sometimes actually a painful one, because Article 223 of the Constitution of Kenya provides for supplementary budgets, but for matters that were not foreseen when the budget was being prepared. But then now what we have seen in a lot of county governments, and including at the national government, is that supplementary budget now have become the mechanism for reorganizing the budget, so that you even approve the budget knowing very well that you're not likely to meet your revenue targets, and therefore you use a supplementary budget. So for instance, the national government has just had the approval of the supplementary budget today. You check your calendar, is 26th of June. The financial year is coming to an end on 30th of June. When you look at that supplementary budget, a lot of the numbers basically, it's like reorganizing the financial statement. The accountants in the room will know what I'm saying. Is basically putting the money where it was spent in the right place in the financial documents. And we have raised concerns about that because adjusting a budget 4 days to the end of the financial year, you cannot say there is an emergency that has just happened. That could actually be a matter you can take care of in the next financial year. That has actually been happening even at the county level, and it's a question that we have raised, because then what it does, it reorganizes budgets a lot, and destabilizes a prudent spending, creating quite a bit of instability and certainty with the budget framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Daktari. I hope those questions were answered well. There's also
Hello?
Yes,
I
can
can't
you
hear you, Gesa.
Yes. You can hear me?
Yes,
Go ahead,
now I
Elisa.
can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I was saying, Daktari, thank you for the elaborate answers. So there's also one question from Emmanuel. And of course, Emmanuel, thanks you for the elaborate presentation. And it's like, considering that we are just a few days to the budget approval deadline, what would be your advice for us going into the implementation stage of the budget? We are close to that deadline. What is your advice, Daktari?
Good. So this is where I come back to my presentation earlier and say, you remember what I talked about? Start with the needs assessment. Start with what matters to you. One of our weakest, so we have very good participation at formulation. We have almost perfect participation during approval stage. But we have near zero participation of citizens during implementation, and all over the place, almost what I call for Kenyans hapakule kind of participation with the audits. Partly because the audits come long after the financial year has ended. People even don't know when they are being tabled in parliament and what have you. So yet, if you ask me, if I was to say, just like I emphasized that perhaps the biggest place of participation during budget making process is, in that time of a formulation between February and April, then perhaps the most critical part of this budget is during implementation, because this is when the money now gets to do the work. It's when the services get to be delivered. So right now, are you interested in healthcare? I would take the healthcare budget for the county I come from and the national level, pick certain lines that I would like to follow through how they are being done. Because that is where, and how would I engage? Sometimes people get lost. I would engage by raising questions with the department responsible for those services. By saying, I know there is an allocation of so much, I would like to know what are the plans. I will then push that to the health committee. A lot of these departmental committees in the county assemblies and the national level, often they are just, idle, waiting for, because they can only raise questions based on issues that have been raised. Those are the people you petition. Of course, it's not always that they act, in public interests. Sometimes they just want to chase somebody down the streets. But that's not something to stop us. Now imagine 5, 10 of us asking questions about healthcare in Vihiga County, and saying, we know the budget has allocated so much for this health facility. What is going on? This is politics is about voices. Voices is about numbers. The number of people asking questions about that service is what makes people respond. If 10 of us send petitions asking, would like to know what is going on with a certain school, has capitation arrived, it will make a very big difference, in that sense. So as we go into the implementation stage, my suggestion is pick the department that is responsible for the service that you are interested in. Pick the budget lines. They are all online, thanks to some of the work that our partners have been doing to push for budget transparency. At the national level, the appropriation bill will be published, so you can tell how much money is going to what department, and you can pick and you can raise questions through the relevant departmental committee. They can ignore one person, but I can assure you they cannot ignore 10 people, they cannot ignore 50 people, they cannot ignore 100 people, they cannot ignore 1,000 people, all asking questions around. Because Kenyans, if we are not going to bother about how our money is spent, it's like investing in a circle and never attending the AGMs, never following up your statement, but every month you just continue to send your money to that circle. I don't think any of us does that. We keep following up to know what's happening, where is our money going, what is being invested in. And whatever we don't resolve during the year, we bring it to the AGM, and decide we are going to have new board members and the like. Yeah, so I think
Yes.
I'll just pick this one question from Alex, if you don't mind, so that because I see my time is running out. Do we have the provision for petition and the implementation? Yes, the provision for petition is actually made under the Constitution, but also provided in the standing orders of the respective assemblies, both county assemblies and the National Assembly and the Senate. You have a right to petition on any matter, whether you know what you're talking about or not. It is the responsibility of the respective. So what do I mean by you don't know about it? You can go to a health facility and all you know is that there are no drugs. It is none of your business to know how drugs get to that health facility. It is none of your business to know how much they cost and who buys them. You can petition and say, I would like to know why this health facility does not have drugs. Send that letter to the respective department, send it to the county assembly, to the clerk, and the clerk will pass it to the departmental committee. The rest, the questions, then you have a right to get an answer. And that's what I said, because sometimes many of us shy away from asking questions because we think we need to ask intelligent questions. There is no better intelligent question that I want to know why this road continues to have potholes, yet it's a key road that we all use. The Department of Roads and the committee responsible for roads at the National Assembly or the County Assembly that you're engaged in should actually follow up to provide an answer as to what has happened. Good. Thank you very much. Over to you, Eliasa, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Daktari. Allow me to, I see my senior, Dr. Kirer. Daktari, maybe you can unmute and just make a comment. I know you posted in the chat, but just 1 minute, unmute and make a comment.
Okay, thank you, Elias. Thank you, Dr. Abraham, for the nice presentation. My comment virtually is on the biggest question is how to make public participation effective. Because if you look at recent happenings is in the county governments, for example, you're expected to do public participation up to ward, even up to the village level, which is the smallest administrative unit. Then you find, for example, national government does it one day in KICC. So is that effective? That would be food for thought for everyone. And another problem would be the linkage of the planning documents. Now, let's talk of Agenda 2063. We talk about Vision 2030, and then we come to the MTEF, link that to the budget, and make follow through even before you do implementation of the budgets having been passed by the relevant assemblies. And finally, yes, the issue of supplementary budgets, really the law doesn't really cap out and bring out clearly the aspect of public participation, but it's equally important. As much as the PFM provides for and allows for reallocations and environments, again, it would be important that we know where this money is moving to between the votes, and we are there to the provisions in the PFM and the Constitution. Otherwise, thank you. This was an insightful session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daktari. You'd also allow me 1 minute, Dr. Barasa. Daktari, you can unmute and just have 1 minute.
Okay. Thank you, Eliezer, for this opportunity. And I would really want to thank Dr. Abrams. He's really made a good pitch for the budget process and also where we can participate as citizens. Like he's rightfully put, it's maybe we've been engaging at the wrong time when things are already cast in iron. So I'm sure it's gonna help in terms of moving forward, in terms of the engagement. I liked the level of engagement at service level, and this can really go a long way in helping shape the public discourse moving forward. I also liked his encouragement that we should not just think that whatever has been, if citizens' comments are never taken. So the more people complain, the more it takes notice. So I think for me is to thank Dorte&Associates for organizing these events, and just to encourage, maybe we need to be getting more people. I saw like at best we had maybe like 60. Maybe if we can spread the word, will really help, because this is a free, at least for now, free learning opportunity. So I would encourage each one to tell a friend about these forums so that we get informed. So thank you very much, and I wish everybody a good evening.
Thank you, Daktari. Yeah, so that is a good point. I know in all our webinars, we've been ranging 100 plus. And as I said, maybe it's the effect of, I believe it should be the effect of what we faced yesterday as a nation. But it is what it is. Thank you, Daktari. Without taking much time, I see our time is up. Allow me to welcome the managing partner for Dorte&Associates. I know I've seen comments, people are like, will we get the slides? We need more of this. Allow me to welcome our managing partner for more information on that, and as she closes the meeting. Welcome, CPA Dot.
Okay, thank you very much, Eliezer. I would really like to respect all, because Daktari had said he had 1 hour up to 9. So thank you very much, Abraham. Abraham were together in college in KU. He was our KUSA chairperson, and many of us here were students there as well. So he was a chairperson and we were in student leadership together. So thank you very much for volunteering. Now, I'm not going to let you go before you give us a parting shot. And before I tell you that people here, I've seen a lot of people calling themselves budget champions in counties. And Abraham, they're saying you cannot leave them high and dry like this, that we should do a follow-up. That these things you said about petitioning and what, these are professionals, these are people who've gone to school, so they can ask the very smart questions. But how can they do it? What are the channels? So we are going to ask you for a follow-up of this session to get to the practical part, because as professionals, we have the higher responsibility now that we are well educated to actually ask the smart questions and get these things working the way they should. So we'll come back to you another time for a follow-up. And we'll share with you the slides because Abraham is okay with it. And we'll keep having these sessions. And just to say also, Constantine Barasa is a new friend of Dorte&Associates, and you'll be seeing him more and more in our activities. So I'm going to give this one back to you, Rugo, to give us your parting shot and to commit to us that next time you'll come and help us to actually do the petitions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's good to see also people I know. When you say budget champions and budget facilitators, I think I have a good connection with them. And some of them are part of just the work we have been trying to put together. Really appreciate everybody who is here. I think we are in an interesting time of our country. Regardless of what side of the political divide we fall or we subscribe to, I think we all want our country to work. Recently I put together an article, and one of the things I argued is that we all hope for the best, but hope is not a strategy. Hope is what empowers our strategies. So my challenge to all of us is to ask, what is it that I can do from my corner as an accountant, as an economist, as a researcher, as a community mobilizer, as a politician, as a church leader, whatever space you find yourself in, what can you do to make, first of all, a contribution, which means by doing the right thing? Because we all say we want integrity, we want honesty, we want value, but what do we offer value ourselves? But secondly, I think a democracy only grows when people ask questions. I know some of us were not schooled to ask questions. We were schooled to obey and to answer questions. Our children are teaching us the very different world that you have to ask questions. Democracies grow by asking questions. Parliaments, their full job is to ask questions. And that's why I talked about petitions quite at length. And we can come and do that, can do that session. Yes, I commit when invited again, I will come, but I might not come in person. I will come through my team. I have a very competent team that can do a very good job, in terms of even the details. But the point is, let's not stop asking questions, because questions is what build a democracy. Questions is what builds a society. And questions actually even empower some people, even within government, who are trying to ask the same questions, but they are only one voice. So when all of us are asking questions, and questions about improvement, as the examples I gave, who doesn't want a road without potholes? Who doesn't want a school that is fully equipped and teachers are present? We all want progress. So what else do we do? And because nobody asks us to pay taxes, they are collected almost by force, by law. Let's at least make our contribution by asking, where is my tax going? And lastly, remember, all these things we are talking about are empowered by your money. Your taxes. Some people say I don't pay payee, but everything you buy has standard tax, has standard VAT, zero VAT, or exempt, whatever it is. Those are just technical terms. The fact is, all of us make a contribution to tax. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you, Dot, for really inviting me. I appreciate it.
Asante sana, and I think that's a powerful parting shot. I cannot add to it. So guys, we meet again in the next session where we'll bring to you the next expert. And like Abraham has committed, we will follow up with how we can actually make this participation effective, just like Dr. Kirer said. So thank you very much, everyone. It's good night from all of us, and see you in the next session. Bye for now.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.